Avrupa Birliği Delegasyonu Ekonomik ve Sosyal Kalkınma Daire Başkanı Sayın Ángel Gutiérrez Hidalgo de Quintina, Avrupa Birliği Başkanlığı Mali İşbirliği ve Proje Uygulama Genel Müdürü Sayın Bülent Özcan ve saygıdeğer misafirlerimiz. Avrupa Birliği ve Türkiye Cumhuriyeti ortak finansmanı ile yürütülen ve Dışişleri Bakanlığı, AB Başkanlığı, Ulusal IPA Koordinatörlüğü'nün operasyon faydalanıcısı olduğu 2014, 2015 ve 2016 Türkiye yıllık programlarının değerlendirilmesi için teknik yardım projesi kapsamında gerçekleştirilen IPA Türkiye Değerlendirmesi Öğrenim, Deneyimi Konferansı'na hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Şimdi açılış konuşmalarını yapmak üzere Avrupa Birliği Delegasyonu'ndan Ekonomik ve Sosyal Kalkınma Daire Başkanı Sayın Ángel Gutiérrez Hidalgo de Quintina'yı kürsüye davet ediyorum.
Günaydın, dear Bülent Bey, dear Cemre Bey, Hanım, representatives, colleagues from the NIPAC, from the line ministries, expert Liliana, other experts in charge of this evaluation. I'm very pleased to be here today on behalf of the European Union delegation. I would like to welcome you to this important meeting we have, which also marks an important step in this quite broad evaluation exercise we have implemented. And today we will have the opportunity to see the results of this draft evaluation reports that have been covering 9 areas and also about 45 or 56 projects in total. So this is a huge exercise. I would like again to thank all the work implemented by the team of experts and also, of course, the collaboration from NIPAC, the line ministries in this exercise, which is indeed very important, but also was happening during a very difficult period. So this is, of course, something we need to acknowledge. As you know, we have been living in pandemic. Now we are living the post-pandemic, but still with some restrictions. And it's difficult to carry out this type of exercises when you need to meet with people, you need to exchange experience. So I would like again to thank everybody for their expert, their spirit of collaboration in achieving, in completing this exercise. Evaluation and monitoring are, of course, very important elements of the project cycle, as you know. And for us, we carried out this exercise in collaboration with NIPAC related to our IPA assistance. We have selected, as I said, 46 projects which cover important areas of our cooperation, also sometimes areas which are not so easy in our bilateral cooperation, but which are also reflecting the important advances that Turkey is implementing in the aligning with the European Union, also as a candidate country, and also achieving the acquis communautaire. These are also evaluations that reflect on the lessons we learned from the projects, what we have achieved, and also can give us recommendations and other aspects to learn from this, what we have done well under this project. Many projects have been very successful. Some projects maybe have had some problems, so sometimes we also have to learn from these problems and how to better address them in the future. And this process also fits in the program cycle and how we are implementing in the future. For instance, now we are together working also in the programming of IPA 3. So I hope also that some of the elements of this exercise, we can take them into account in the ongoing and future programming we are implementing. But also, most importantly for us, this evaluation exercise is also a way to show the results we have achieved under this program, what we have achieved, and therefore also how the beneficiary institutions have been, for instance, strengthened. If we are doing capacity building, many of these projects concern capacity building. And also there are always indirect elements, which is always the most difficult part of the evaluation, to evaluate the impact on final beneficiaries. And in the end, these are all projects that try to support Turkey in the economic development and also addressing final beneficiaries and individuals that often benefit from these projects. So it's also very good to have some ideas of what has been this real impact of this project, and besides, of course, their efficiency and the learning about the process. These are also projects that relate to the instrument pre-accession, as I said. So it's for us also as European Union important to understand what is the added value in European Union terms and in the process of European accession. We are working together with many beneficiary institutions, and these projects have covered many. The projects we are reviewing today are, as we said, covering 9 important areas. For example, well, agriculture, but focusing on animal health issues. The very important collaboration we have with Turkey under civil society, which is here to promote dialogue, participation, also involving business, cultural heritage. We are also addressing issues like migration, border management, justice, etc. So, as I said, these are areas where it's not always easy to cooperate, but where our collaboration has been very important, and we also need to ensure that these projects have achieved their results as expected. Today, I think also will be a good opportunity to, between the experts here and the line ministries and the NIPAC, to discuss about the methodology and exchange experience on the process of evaluation. So during these 2 days, I think you will have a good opportunity to learn also from each other. We are always learning and the processes are changing. We had to learn very quickly during the pandemic how to evolve and how to address these evaluations processes. And also, in the end, to see also how we can analyze the projects and review their performance in order also to identify better the impact, as I said, which is the important element that we want to achieve. For us, also, the results of these evaluations will, of course, as I said, offer us the opportunity to identify the European Union added value, but it's also an important element, and this is another element I wanted to link with this evaluation, is the visibility of our programs. These are programs that are using European Union and Turkey's resources, and it's important that we also know that these results have also been visible and have been also shown as an example of our bilateral cooperation. And finally, also, we want to make sure that the beneficiaries have been involved in these processes, that have been also have been empowered to manage these projects, and also in the end have ensured that these projects will have a sustainability in the future. Finally, I would like to thank again everybody for their efforts and their great work during this difficult period, as I said, and wish you a very good and fruitful discussions during these 2 days. Thank you all for your attention.
Sayın Kuantana'ya konuşmaları için teşekkür ediyoruz. Şimdi de Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Avrupa Birliği Başkanlığı, Mali İşbirliği ve Proje Uygulama Genel Müdürü Sayın Bülent Özcan'ı konuşmasını yapmak üzere kürsüye davet ediyorum.
Avrupa Birliği Delegasyonu çok değerli temsilcisi, sevgili Anhel, yıllık programlarımızın IPA kapsamında lider kuruluşlarının çok değerli temsilcileri, uzmanları, Avrupa Birliği Başkanlığı'ndaki çok değerli çalışma arkadaşlarım, hepinizi saygıyla selamlayarak sözlerime başlamak istiyorum. Bugün Anhel de çok güzel ifade etti, altını da çizdi. Bizler açısından aslında proje döngüsü süreçleri içerisinde, katılım öncesi mali yardımın altında uyguladığımız projelerdeki proje döngüsünün içerisindeki en önemli aşamalardan, son aşamalardan bir tanesi olan değerlendirme aşaması ile ilgili bir araya gelmiş bulunmaktayız. 2014, 2015 ve 2016 yılları altındaki katılım öncesi mali yardımın altında yıllık programlar olarak ifade ettiğimiz sektörlerde yer alan projelerin değerlendirileceği bir proje içerisindeki bir konferansta, bir çalıştayda bir araya gelmiş bulunuyoruz. Yaklaşık bir yıl önce başlayan, bir yıldan daha kısa bir süre önce başlayan projemizde bizler yıllık programlar altındaki IPA projelerini masaya yatırıp bu projelerdeki kazanımlarımızı değerlendirmeye çalışıyoruz. Bu anlamda teknik destek ekibimiz de, takım liderimiz, anahtar uzmanlarımız, bu süreci destekleyen kilit uzmanlar ve AB Başkanlığı'ndaki proje ekibimizle beraber yıllık programları yürüten lider kuruluşlarla yakın bir işbirliği içerisindeyiz. Birçok saha ziyareti yapıldı. Birçok projeyle ilgili değerlendirme toplantıları yapıldı. Veriler ve raporlar üzerinden analizler gerçekleştirildi. Sonuçta ortaya sektörlerle ilgili değerlendirme raporlarının taslakları çıktı. Bugünkü toplantıda da sizler bunlar üzerine görüşlerinizi ve değerlendirmelerinizi vereceksiniz. Akabinde de bu tematik ya da sektörel raporları tamamlamış olacağız ve sonbahar itibariyle de projemizi tamamlamış olacağız. Şimdiden belki ifade etmek lazım, takvimlerimize de işlemek lazım. 15 Eylül tarihinde de bir aksilik olmazsa projemizin kapanış konferansını gerçekleştirmeyi hedefliyoruz. Ve sizlerle de özellikle bugünkü toplantılar, bugünkü tartışmalar, bugünkü çalışma gruplarında elde edeceğimiz sonuçları da içine entegre ettiğimiz bir kapanış ve değerlendirme imkanı olacak. Eylül'de yapacağımız toplantıda da bizlerle beraber. Bu açıdan da bizler için bugün sizin vereceğiniz feedbackler, bugün ve yarın sizin vereceğiniz feedbackler bizler için çok değerli ve kıymetli. Biz 2014, 2015 ve 2016 paketleri içerisinde 40'tan fazla projeyi mercek altına aldık bu proje kapsamında ve arkadaşlarımızla beraber değerlendirmelerimizi bu nokta üzerine, bu projeler üzerine odakladık. Aslına baktığımız zaman İPA'nın günlük yönetimi, günlük koşuşturmacası içerisinde belki ihmal ettiğimiz bir kavram değerlendirme. Ama aslında hepimiz açısından bizlere ışık verecek çok önemli bir çalışma. Belki de gerekli zamanı, vakti çok daha fazla ayırmamız gereken de bir aşama ve bir çalışma baktığımızda. Çünkü temel olarak bizim açımızdan bu 3 tane önemli kazanımı sağlıyor değerlendirme. Bir tanesi İPA'nın biliyorsunuz bir sektörel yaklaşımı var. Ve bu sektörel yaklaşım içerisinde burada yapmış olduğumuz değerlendirmeler bu sektörde elde ettiğimiz kazanımları, kullandığımız kaynağın verimliliğini ve etkisini, bu sektörde ortaya koyduğumuz hedeflerle ilgili olarak geldiğimiz noktayı değerlendirmemiz açısından bizim için büyük bir fırsat. O yüzden değerlendirmeyle elde ettiğimiz en önemli kazanımlardan bir tanesi bu. İkincisi elbette karar alıcıların, politika yapıcıların en yüksek mertebeden uzmanlık seviyesine kadarki aşamayı kastediyorum. Tüm karar alıcı kurumların aslında politikalarına yön verebilecek, ileriki çalışmalarına yön verebilecek nitelikte de feedbackler sağlıyor. Bu açıdan baktığımızda da bizim açımızdan da ikinci kazanımımız bu. Elbette son olarak da IPA yaşayan bir süreç. Hepinizin bildiği gibi biz her ne kadar IPA 3 sürecine geçmiş olsak da halihazırda hala IPA 2'nin içindeyiz. Uygulamalarımız devam ediyor. Ama diğer taraftan da IPA'nın katılım öncesi mali yardımın yeni döneminde de proje fikirleri geliştiriyoruz. Ve bu proje fikirlerini geliştirirken de işte bu değerlendirmede elde ettiğimiz bulgular üzerine bir anlamda projelerimizi kurgulayabiliriz. Üçüncü bir kazanım olarak da bu yeni dönemde geliştirdiğimiz fikirlere yönelik bize önemli bir yol haritası sağlıyor değerlendirme çalışmaları. O yüzden de aslında hepimizin daha fazla vakit ayırması gereken, daha fazla tartışması gereken bir imkan. Bu çalışmaları daha önce de elbette yapıyorduk ama böylesine tekil ve birçok sektörü kapsayan bir proje içerisinde bunu entegre etmemiştik. Açıkçası Avrupa Birliği Başkanlığı olarak AB mali yardımlarının genel koordinasyonunu yapan kurum olarak bir proje içerisinde birçok sektörü ele alarak yaptığımız bu çalışmanın çok verimli olduğunu söyleyebiliriz. Ve bundan sonraki süreçte de bizlerin koordinasyonunda sizlerin önemli desteğiyle bu tarz değerlendirme projelerinin belli periyotlarda katılım öncesi mali yardım içerisinde olmasının hatta belki İPA'nın bütününü kapsayacak nitelikte bunun dizayn edilmesinin yararlı olacağını açıkçası değerlendiriyoruz. O yüzden de bu projeyi belki Eylül ayında bitireceğiz ama devam projelerinin mutlaka gelmesi gerektiği konusunu açıkçası arkadaşlarımızla değerlendirdik. Bu hususu da hem AB delegasyonuyla hem de Brüksel'le Genişleme Genel Müdürlüğü'yle de müzakere etmek istiyoruz. Ama zaten değerli Anhel'de konuşmasında değerlendirme sürecinin devam etmesi gerektiğini ve bu çalışmaların bizlere ışık ve vizyon veren çalışmalar olduğunu, delegasyonun da bunu desteklemeye hazır olduğunu da ifade etti. Bu da bizim açımızdan aslında hemfikir olduğumuzun da önemli bir göstergesi baktığımızda. Tabii aslında İPA süreçlerinde biliyorsunuz belki de uygulamanın bize kattığı en önemli unsurlardan bir tanesi de bu yaparak öğrenme. Lessons learned dediğimiz, teknik jargonda hep kullandığımız hususlar aslında. İşte değerlendirme çalışması bize bu yaparak öğrenmeyi en iyi yansıtan işlerden bir tanesi. O yüzden sizden ricam, bugün öğlene kadarki olan bölüm biraz daha teorik, kazandığımız kazanımlarımızı belki bize sunumlarla anlatılacak bir bölüm ama öğleden sonra ve yarın yapılacak olan çalışma grupları bilahare sizlerin deneyimlerinizi yansıttığınız, anlattığınız veya kağıt üzerinde o deneyimin yansıyıp yansıtmadığını sorgulayabileceğiniz workshoplar var. O yüzden burada sizin katkılarınız bizim açımızdan çok önemli olacak. O yüzden de cesurca ve şiddetli bir şekilde birbirinizi kışkırtarak tartışmaların içinde olmanızı bekliyoruz, tavsiye de ediyoruz. Hararetli olmasını arzu ediyoruz tartışmaların ama bunun hepimize önemli kazanımlar sağlayacağından da eminiz. O yüzden de bu katılım göstermiş olduğunuz performansa, katkıya bir anlamda tekrar teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Bizim açımızdan az önce de ifade ettim, çok değerli bir proje, önemli bir proje. Açıkçası kurgularken bize bu kadar ışık tutabileceğini de çok belki de düşünmemiştik. Ama bizim açımızdan şu ana kadarki geldiği noktada ciddi anlamda önümüzdeki dönemdeki çalışmalarımıza yol gösterebilecek kazanımları elde ettiğimiz bulguları görmeye başladık. Hem kağıt üzerinde hem de sizlerle yapılan çalışmalarda. O yüzden dediğimiz gibi bizim için çok yararlı ve önemli. Bugün arkadaşlarımız tabii her ne kadar hararetli tartışmalar olacaksa da masalara tatlılar bıraktılar. Bu da tabii Türk geleneğinde biliyorsunuz tatlı yiyelim, tatlı konuşalım ifadesi vardır. O yüzden hem tatlı yiyeceğiz, tatlı konuşacağız ama hararetli olmaktan da kaçınmayacağız. O vesileyle de bir kez daha teknik ekibe bu göstermiş olduğu yaratıcı yaklaşımdan dolayı teşekkürlerimizi iletmek isterim. Ben bu vesileyle öncelikle AB Başkanlığındaki çalışma arkadaşlarıma teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Lider kuruluşlarda asıl sektörlerdeki arkadaşlarımıza, uzman arkadaşlarımıza, yönetici arkadaşlarımıza teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Bugüne kadarki göstermiş oldukları anlayış ve katkıdan dolayı teknik ekibimize, anahtar uzmanlarımıza ve bugün özellikle workshopları, öğleden sonra yapılacak ve yarın yapılacak olan workshopları yönetecek olan moderatörlerimize de elbette teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Tabii bu süreçte AB delegasyonunun ve Avrupa Komisyonu'nun desteği de her zaman çok önemliydi. Bundan sonraki süreçte de olacağına eminim. Bir kez de AB delegasyonundaki değerli yetkililere teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Umarım verimli, güzel, keyifli bir çalışma olur. Hep beraber kazanımlarımızı görürüz. Bir tek ricam var. Bundan sonraki aşamada rapor yazmak kolay, raporları oluşturmak kolay ama onları yaşatmak önemli olan, içindeki mesajları doğru insanlara ulaştırmak önemli olan, bizim açımızdan bugün de elde edeceğimiz bilgiler doğrultusunda bu projede elde ettiğimiz tüm kazanımları karar alıcılara aynı zamanda da topluma ulaştırabilecek doğru iletişim kanallarını ve mesajlarını da hep beraber çıkarmamız gerekiyor. Biraz da bunun üzerine kafa yormamız gerekiyor. Belki bugünkü tartışmalarda biraz bunun bu boyutunu da konuşmak, tartışmak yararlı olabilir. Onun da bir kez daha altını vurgulamak istiyorum. Hepinize güzel, verimli, güzel toplantılar diliyorum. Saygıyla selamlıyorum.
Sayın Özcan'a konuşmaları için teşekkürlerimizi sunuyoruz. Değerli katılımcılarımız, açılış konuşmalarımız burada sona ermiştir. Programımıza teoriden pratiğe, titiz metodolojiden faydalı önerilere, değerlendirici ve paydaşların değerlendirme konusundaki deneyimlerini paylaştığı ve Sayın Liliana Lucasiu'nun moderatörlüğünü üstlendiği oturumumuza devam edeceğiz. Oturumun ardından 15 dakikalık bir kahve molamız olacak. Şimdi proje takım lideri Sayın Liliana Lucasiu'yu kürsüye davet ediyorum.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. 10 months ago, we started this project having in mind that we have a huge responsibility to provide you something useful after a very intensive and extensive work covering so many 6 sectors and so many interventions funded by IPA program. We knew that the journey is not easy because we were in the pandemics. And indeed, we lived everything pandemics offered us, the switch, the sharp, the fast switch from physical presence to online, also canceling missions due to positive COVID tests one day before starting, meeting you online and trying to capture the essence of your activities and interventions through the new methods. We learned a lot, and we had in mind that we have to do a good job. And this good job is not only providing you the reports with few recommendations. We really believe and do our best to provide you something that will really lead to an improvement, because we have all to improve. We have to improve our evaluation competencies and our work, but more than that, the interventions that will be further on implementing in Turkey should feel the improvement and the benefit of all the evaluations and other complementary works which are extensively undertaken by the Monitoring and Evaluation Unit of NIPAC. So we knew that we have to bring the state-of-the-art methods and also the best mix of expertise in our teams, but also to connect to the realities here in Turkey. And we feel now, because it's maybe a professional deviation, that we all the time monitor and assess our own lives and every small process. We see now that we have science, we have evidence that we succeeded to a large extent. But the discussions we will have today and tomorrow and the finalization of the reports will confirm more that. We succeeded to connect because we have a large team, including many national experts with a wide experience and excellent expertise which complemented us. We succeeded because you were very kind and you responded to my colleagues' requests to participate and contribute. And we really felt that we have a good environment. And after the pandemic reduced its intensity, and we were able to come here and to feel on the ground the reality. And maybe the nicest compliment I received 2 days ago from one colleague was that on Tunali Street, she told me, "You look local." So I feel very comfortable now working with you. And my introduction now, it's about starting to work together, as in the introductory speeches, which are very inspiring. The direction is that we are here to enjoy working together, but in the end is to do a good job. It's about learning, to learn together. And we thought that it's an excellent opportunity, thinking that you receive some recommendations, you receive reports from us. But from our experience, reading the recommendations is not enough. In order to be able to implement and to do the improvement in the future, you have to better understand the details which are behind the limited number of recommendations. And also from our experience, we learned that it's good to discuss them, to have these opportunities, and the ERG meetings are a perfect opportunity to discuss them. We enlarged this process with this discussion about methodology. We want to share with you what we did and what maybe we could not do because objective conditions, and also to listen you, what are your concerns? What would be the constraints in believing and trusting the results so that you can make the effort, because implementing recommendations is an effort, is an action that requires resources, and it's a change, and always change is a challenge. I would start, maybe many of you have already seen some presentations with the basic data about our project. Just a snapshot, I would like to highlight that we will end in 8th of October, but the main event will be 15th of September, where we will be able to discuss more about the results which are agreed among us and accepted. Then this is the timeline, and I used it from the beginning, and now I remember when we started with the red circle at the start, and now we are at the end when we can harvest the results of the evaluation. And now about the evaluability scope. It's a big evaluation among many evaluations in which our team was involved in other countries in the member states. Indeed, it is large, and it's covering the 6 sectors. We build the methodology, and we build the team, and we can see that this participatory approach involving the stakeholders and interaction, facilitating interaction of the team, is reflected also in the IT tools in Teams, where we have several channels. We have the core team, we have the extended team, we have the all experts, and the wider environment channel. So we adapted, we faced the challenges, but we are happy that the faces that we have seen on the screens now we can see physically, and that we have the opportunity to work with you around the tables in the next sessions. Now, what is the objective? Because in order to be effective, we have to set some objectives. From our side, we propose you to discuss, to have the common objective that we understand and we agree on the evaluation reports, conclusions, and findings that we will discuss in more detail in the afternoon and tomorrow morning for each sector. So understand better the details and how we did things so that we can build this trust among ourselves that the results will reflect the reality. Then a second objective is to learn. And as Bill and Bay mentioned, we learn together. We learn as evaluators, but we learn from you. It's important to understand how you perceive what we are doing, what is appropriate and what is not. And the title of this session is From Theory to Practice. Of course, we want to bring from theory the best methods, the well-renowned, recognized, or modern. But if they don't fit to the environment, they don't work. So we want to see what worked well, what didn't work well, and what we should adjust until the end of the project. We added a small touch of sweetness on your tables. We offered you a box of chocolate with the label Sweet Evaluation Experience. Evaluation is many times bitter for us evaluators and for our stakeholders because we discuss openly things which didn't work. But still, if we have this constructive approach, evaluation is not about criticizing. Evaluation is about doing things better. And on both sides, we know that we can do things better. And also the stakeholders are aware that things can be done better. So we propose we join together in this session and the one after the coffee break, discussing openly together about how we can make theory work better in practice. So in the end that we change. In fact, learning is about changing behaviors and improving. If we look if you look on the agenda, just a big view of the process. Now we will continue with some presentations which are aiming to set some ideas for discussion. After the coffee break, we will come back together and we will work around the tables. Myself and all my colleagues will sit with you and we will for sure overcome the language barriers so that we can exchange these experiences. Then we will come back and we will share what we concluded in the small groups, and also my colleagues, because we have some international colleagues which work for many years in Turkey, they can share with you how they see evaluation evolved with the eyes from an external expert. My local experts can, our team local experts also can add from their experience, and also how you see evaluation as beneficiaries. So we do hope we are able to create a pleasant environment, because I believe that learning can happen only in a pleasant environment. So having these things said, I propose you to start work. It's we finish with speeches and we start working together. For this, the first step would be an opinion poll about evaluation, and the stakeholders which follow us online could contribute also, could participate. So I ask my colleague Piril to go to the opinion poll. So please use your smartphones and open www.menti.com. Okay, could you do this, please? Menti.com, and you will be asked a code. The code is on the screen, 72025735. And the first question is, I wait a bit so that you can connect. If anyone has problems, my colleague could help. It's okay? So the first question is, how would you describe in 3 words what evaluation means for you? We will have answers from evaluators. We will have answers from beneficiaries. So I think it's a very good mix about evaluation perception. We have the results on the screen, and the words which are bigger means that there are several inputs with the same word. So the most frequent is recommendations, assessment, sustainability, lessons, efficiency. Okay, it's working. We will share with you the results after we finish the exercise. So improvement is coming bigger. Okay, we also have some Turkish words. Still working. Okay, I think we can stop now because we have another question in the poll. Please go to the next slide, and you have on your smartphones an option, go to the next slide. So the next slide is, what are the 3 most effective or preferred evaluation methods from your past experience? So up to now, which do you think are the most effective or preferred? It depends on the situation. If you are an evaluator, maybe you can opt for a preferred method. Okay, I think interviews is the biggest one. Field visits, which is the same with site visits, and they together for sure would be larger. Great. Okay, so we understand from this that interaction is essential for evaluation. This is, I think, the message that we get from the room. And today we plan to discuss how interaction is changing in the current conditions, because maybe we could have been more here physically, but having also the online option, always we will have this split between online and physical, which is not bad. It's offering more opportunities. So thank you very much. I think we can stop now the poll, and let's go in deeper into the work on methods and on the evaluation process. As I said, in order to have a fruitful discussion, we will launch some ideas. And I invited 3 of our colleagues to make some presentations which will give us food for discussion. We planned 3 topics linked one to each other. We start with the general view of evaluation today and tomorrow, what is changing. And then we will go into something more technical, the intervention logic, the big challenge in any phase of the policy making. and program cycle, and then a bit more in detail on indicators. So these are the three presentations. And I would like to introduce now all my three colleagues which will do the presentation for efficiency so that we don't have to come to present one by one. So first we will have Sophie Papalexiou. I can say that she's a very experienced evaluator, but I would add an inspiring one. Is the person that you would like to talk to. And she met many evaluators in her life, maybe because an advantage was that she is a partner in Particip, which is a big consultancy and which is also our contractor in this project. And she will be here and she is the director of the Brussels office, but here she will be the inspiring evaluator. She will be followed by Steve O'Connor. I must tell about Steve that he is the rigorous evaluator, which combines perfectly this rigorosity with the deep understanding of the environment. And here he is on advantage in Turkey because he started working in 2007 and he is a real local. And then will come Dagmar, which will bring in the presentations the touch from the academic environment. She is teaching in a university, but those that you met her, for sure you notice that she is a very calm and systematic and planned evaluator. Altogether, they are a perfect mix, and in the breaks, if you can ask them questions, for sure we will learn from these discussions. I will stop here. I'm sorry, I'm always speaking more than I intend to do, but we are still in time. Time will be our big enemy these 2 days, and let's wish us a good and productive work, and pleasant. Thank you very much. Sophie, may I invite you? Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Indeed, before starting to dig into the results of the evaluation, I would like to share with you some considerations about what is evaluation and where is it going. As Liliana said, I have been implementing evaluations in many different environments since many years, and I know indeed a lot of evaluators. So what we have both been doing to prepare the data, because we are always obsessed by data when we are evaluating, we have made a little survey. We've reached out to our networks and we have asked them questions about how they see the evolution of methodologies and of challenges in evaluation. And it's the result of this small survey that we will present you today. Before this survey, I would like to think again with you about the definition of evaluation. We saw in the opinion poll that a lot of words are appearing, some bigger, some smaller, but of course there are official definitions. And of course it's important, it's not only about knowing what the definition is, but it's because definitions give a context to what we are doing. So it's important to analyze them and to understand who thinks what. I've been taking the definitions from main organizations that have enough resources to have big M&E departments and to put a lot of thoughts about what they are doing and about the context. So you can see here, I have the definition from the OECD. I have the definition a little bit shortened from the better regulations of the EU. I have a definition extracted from Capacity for Dev, which is the practitioners network from the European Commission. And I also added some definitions from the UNDP and from the UNICEF, because I think that it's obvious that UN organizations have also a lot of experience in evaluation. So you can see some take more space than others, and in order to analyze them better, we've been cutting them into pieces. So we've looked at them from the 3 dimensions. What is it? So what kind of activity is it evaluating? What is it focusing on? And for what? The for what is, of course, the most important. And if you look at this, I mean, basically it's the same text as in the previous slide, but it is cut into pieces. And we basically took that to choose the best of each. And here, this is what I would propose as the best of each. I mean, evaluation is an evidence-based judgment of effectiveness, efficiency, relevance, coherence, and with other interventions. And then because we are talking about EU and IPA, we also talk about the EU added value, which is a special add-on. Of course, it doesn't exist in other organizations' definitions. And what is it? Of an existing intervention, a group of intervention, but it can also be of a policy, of legislation, or even of an organization. So evaluation can apply to many different entities. And what is it for? It aims to be an aid in decision-making, informing public opinion, meeting accountability duty, promoting knowledge and understanding. So it's about accountability, which is the kind of more passive part of the purpose, but it's it's about supporting decision-making, and then as an add-on, promoting knowledge and understanding. So this is the main aspects of what is evaluation according to the main large organizations that are dealing with the theory. And then I added a little line underneath, but it's little, but it's not unimportant. It is part of a system. Actually, this systemic conception of evaluation is often a bit forgotten, and people think about monitoring or about evaluation, but in reality it should be a system where everything has its own importance. So it's part of a system which is sometimes called MEL, Monitoring and Evaluation and Learning. Sometimes it's also called MERL, so the R stands for research. And then sometimes it's even called MEAL, with the A accounts for accountability. So as you can see, this is indeed corresponding to what we have been finding out with our little opinion poll and with the previous presentations. What matters is, of course, that we want to reach the aim and that our results support your decision-making. So now we are coming to the results of the little survey that we carried out, and we found out that in terms of evolution and current approaches in evaluation, there are mainly 5 themes that emerge. First of all, use of evaluation. This is a concern and a challenge which matters more and more. Second is the reliability and the availability of data. Third is the integration with other analytical tools in the intervention cycle. Then briefly about case studies. And finally, the methodologies, and in particular, to what extent can we borrow methodologies to scientific experimentation. So about the use of evaluation, it's not a surprise that it becomes paramount in a world where resources are scarce and where every single activity has to reach its purpose. So in principle, what we think as an evaluator, our mantra, if I can put it that way, is that we want to be able to support making a difference. And this is really what guides and conducts our work. And then of course we don't want that evaluation land in a library where they will be covered with dust after a while. We want that indeed they become a living tool that can accompany you on your way to performance improvement. So for that to happen, we need three things. We need to understand what the users, the future users and the stakeholders of the evaluation really want. And believe me, this is not always obvious when we read terms of reference at the beginning of the process. So this requires often a deeper analysis. I call it a stakeholders analysis. And this is something that is increasingly being done in a very serious and systematic way at the beginning of an evaluation. It's not a loss of time. On the contrary, it improves the focus and meeting the needs of the users. So what does it mean, a stakeholders analysis? It means to understand who is doing what, who is a data supplier, who is the user, what for do you want to use it for. Delivering, that's our part. We have to be able to deliver, of course. Which means, what does it mean, delivering? It means providing sound recommendations, which we try to do, ensure they are implementable, which we will do together because we have to test recommendations. And then, of course, we have to ensure that our conclusions are legitimate, which means that they are evidence-based and that nobody can contest the base of evidence. But then there is, of course, another very important actor in all of this to make sure that it's used. It is you. I mean, as you can see at the bottom of this slide, there is a little drawing. It's a relay race. We are giving you the stick, and you have to continue running with it. Indeed, your role is becoming increasingly important as we are getting to the end. We are coming to the finalization of our conclusions, our recommendations. We give the reports to you, but then starts the real work, which is to implement them. The second theme is the reliability of data. And then, of course, it's obvious. I mean, we're talking about evidence-based evaluation more and more, and evidence means data. And the data is the thing that we always struggle with as evaluators. Sometimes we have too much and we don't know how to deal with them, and we are swallowed by the quantity of data, and we have to find ways to segment the data in order to analyze them properly. And sometimes we don't have enough. And then we're struggling as well because the legitimacy of the evidence base is put in danger, put at risk. Okay, about how we collect the data, there are basically two kinds of approaches. The standard approaches, which is what we described also in the opinion poll. We obtain the data through interviews, focus groups, and we extract them from the various reports of the interventions that we are analyzing. And sometimes we also do surveys, or we look at existing macroeconomic data, depending on, of course, on the context and type of evaluation. But there are also some relatively innovative approaches for collecting data and to extract them. These are the big data techniques, data mining, text mining, which enable us to let's say, dig into vast quantities of data, not be drowned into them, but really extract the key information and put it together. There are, as you know, some possibilities to use algorithm and data mining techniques when we have access to big databases. So this is something which is increasing, and some of my colleagues have made very good experience with that, especially in the context of meta-evaluations or, let's say, bigger contexts where we have really a lot of data, quantitative data, to go through. The third theme is integration with other analytical tools in the intervention cycle. I mean, it's important to remember that evaluation is not like, oh, we do an evaluation and then we stop. And on the other side, there are people doing monitoring, and on the others, and on the third side, there are people collecting the information and learning. No, all of this has to fit together and has to form a system. This is actually a traditional way to represent a MERL system, monitoring, evaluating, researching, and learning. But I don't like it that much. I mean, I will show you as a last slide how it now tends to be represented, because I find that monitoring, evaluating, and researching are techniques whereas learning is something that can be extracted from every single part. So it should be more like around and not like one of the quarters. But nevertheless, it's important to remember that everything has to fit together and that a system has to be there rather than one-off activities of evaluation. Then the importance of case studies is also something that came again and again from our colleagues. They think that case studies are more important than one thinks, and that they have a demonstration purpose rather than an illustration purpose. What does this mean? It means that when you make a case study, it's not just to show in another way what you have written in your evaluation. It is part of the research approach, and it has to give the proof that what you are saying is true. So it's really important, first of all, to choose them very well, and then, of course, because we want them to work, so we have to make sure that there are data. So we have to make sure that the case studies that we select can really be the field for applying all the evaluation techniques that we have done for the main work. So in terms of the methodologies, what I get from our colleagues and what I also think is that it is not so much the evaluation methodologies that evolve, but rather the way we apply them. We apply them more and more rigorously over time. There are more and more guidance, and there is even evaluation is now taught at university. This wasn't the case 20 years ago. Of course, it requires more and more, let's say, knowledge about specific notions than it was before. But on the other hand, it's also more standardized. So it's probably easier to grasp from that point of view. So I have two kind of points that I would like to share with you to finalize this discussion about methodologies. Evaluation is not research. And I share this opinion also with Liliana. We have to remain practical and pragmatic. We are not there to elaborate complex and satisfying from the scientific point of view a macroeconomic model. No, we are there to use evidence-based methodologies so that we can come up with concrete recommendations and conclusions. So we have to keep our feet on the ground. We are not macroeconomists. So, of course, sometimes we use research methodologies to collect our data, but there are limitations. And I can give you one example. For instance, some years ago, the big buzz in evaluation was to use double-blind studies. And it was double-blind studies is something that you do when you test drugs. You have one group which takes the drug and the other group that takes a placebo. And then at the end you see the ones that, you see the difference of result between the two. You cannot do that in the reality of evaluation unless you have planned it right from the beginning. And this is indeed the problem of a lot of those scientific methods. They have to be planned during the design phase. Otherwise, they are extremely difficult and it can be discussed if they can be really used. And then the statistics, I call it a friend and an enemy because of course, there is a temptation to use statistical methodologies to prove our words, but we have to be very, very careful. I mean, of course, the bigger our data samples, the more we can use statistical methods. But I have seen many works of evaluators where evaluation methods, and especially the non-parametric evaluation tests, were used where they should not have been used. And this is very dangerous because it gives the impression of legitimate conclusions where they are not, because the samples are not representative. So we have to be very careful, but we are very aware of that, and we are very careful with this. Then asking our colleagues what they thought was the three most important, let's say, challenges with evaluation, I came up with this. I mean, in the first position on the podium, ex aequo, you have the data supply and the collaboration with the assumed users and getting the evaluation question right, which is a bit the same. This is the thing that worries us the most, and when we get that right, we are the most likely to have good results. Then we have, in the second position, and that might surprise you, feedback post-completion, and I will come back to that. And then the third one is the adequacy of the choice of evaluation and the time of resources. I mean, we are always scared that we don't have enough time to do the things, and especially now during the pandemic, we really struggled with time because everything was stretched. So it's not a surprise that we find this on the podium. But now, feedback post-completion. Our big problem as evaluators is that once we have handed over the stick to you, we disappear, and actually we don't know what happened afterwards. And it is, well, sometimes we do, but it is most of the time not foreseen that we get a feedback after the implementation of the recommendations. And of course, we desperately want to know, because this is what would make us really understand what worked and what didn't. So sometimes we are trying to come back to the let's say, contracting authority even after the completion of the contract, and we're gone and doing something else, just to ask, tell us the truth, please, what worked and what didn't. And we have one case where we've been doing evaluations for the Finnish aid organization for many years at my company, and they have a kind of mechanism which is called the management response. And they basically, systematically, 1 or 2 years after bigger evaluations, they don't do it for smaller ones, but for bigger ones, they ask all the users to complete a questionnaire and they send it to the contractor. And we think this is great because this helps us a lot to serve you better the next time. So now, what evaluators like best? In fact, here you can see around on this circle some not methodologies for evaluation, but types of evaluation. And we asked them to classify the ones that they like best: sector evaluation, thematic evaluation, country strategy evaluation, policy legislation, meta-evaluation, or intervention-related evaluation. And what they like best, you will be happy to see, to know, is the sector or thematic evaluation, which is great because this is precisely what you chose to do with this big evaluation. And why do they like it best? Because they think that it allows and requires a wider perspective, and that there is a possibility to collect more data and deeper data, and therefore, of course, the legitimacy of the database is much higher, and we can do more detailed recommendations, and the user's commitment is easier, and but the problem is that we have more users. So, I mean, in fact, you can see the green is the positive, and the red is the, I wouldn't say negative, but more challenging part of the statement. And then, of course, the meta-evaluation is something that we like also, because it gives us the opportunity to look at other evaluations and to see, you know, the best practice and the problems that have been incurred by other evaluators. So, as a takeaway, this is another way to look at a MERL system. I mean, on the x-axis, you can see the time perspective. We start at 0 and we end up at a certain number of years after the completion of an evaluation. And on the y-axis, you can see the different usages that can be made of an evaluation. So it can be done, it can be used for managing, it can be used for reporting results, it can be used for designing new, or to formulate new programs, it can be used for accounting purpose, and finally it can be used for research and for learning. And here on the graph, you can see all the types of evaluations. I mean, the monitoring, it is something that is being done during the intervention, during the activity is taking place, and it is mainly for management purposes. Then you have the annual reporting on interventions. I'm not sure if you have to do that, but probably you do the results reporting on an annual basis. This is a little bit less short time, and it is mainly for reporting purposes. But of course, while you do monitoring, while you do reporting, you start to build the database. So you start to collect the information that can then be used for midterm evaluation of interventions and for ex-post evaluation of interventions, and later on for thematic or sector evaluations. Everything is built on the data created by the previous level. This is why it is indeed a system which is feeding each other, where each step is feeding each other. And then we end up with the meta-evaluation and the research, which is something that you can do once all the evaluations have been done, and to research, let's say, general praxis and best practice and lessons. So this is a new way to, well, it's not new, I mean, it's everybody is cooking with the same ingredients in the end, but it is a new way to at least illustrate it and to show it. And then here, this is indeed another way to show it. You have monitoring, evaluating, and researching, and on the circle around, you have communication, because this is also very important. I mean, as Director Boulen said, it's not only about improving the way interventions are designed, but it is also providing a lot of communication material, and communication is, as we know, essential when we're talking about change management. So I will end the presentation here, and thank you for your attention. And I'm now inviting Steve, who is going to demystify intervention logic. Good luck, Steve.
Good morning, everybody. Well, it's almost good afternoon, but hello. This is without doubt the biggest stage I've ever been on in my life. I've been asked to demystify intervention logics. Intervention logics are very important, so I'm going to spend about 45 minutes. I've got a 35-slide presentation. No, I'm only joking. Yapiorum. I'm only joking. I'm going to be quick and simple, because I know that when people hear the word intervention logics, usually their first hand goes to the mobile phone. Like, I don't want to listen to this. I spend a lot of time talking to people about intervention logics, trying to explain them to them. And I understand now that very often they look at me and think this man's talking a foreign language to me. So what I'm just going to try and do in a few slides is just to give a very simple explanation of what I think intervention logics are. Hopefully it will correspond with what you think intervention logics are. And then I'll just try and put them into the context of the evaluations that you've been working on over the last 8 or 9 months. And I'll leave it at that. I think if you want to reflect on any of the points that I raise or discuss them further, we can do that over the next day or so. Okay, so we'll keep it, I'll move straight on. So I suppose my first question is, of course, do you know what an intervention logic is? You don't have to give me the answer, I'm sure. Everyone will nod because they've heard what it is. Maybe but what we think it is, what one person thinks it is, might be slightly different to what the other person thinks it is. So I'm just going to put up some ideas of my own here. Okay, so what is an intervention logic? It's the path that we think or expect our interventions will follow to deliver our objectives. I mean, that's already, I'm supposed to demystify it, and I use this jargon straight away, so that's probably not a great start. But it's built around a very basic, simple logic, and it is if and then. So if we do this, and these things we do, and there are other things out there that do what we expect them to do or don't change, then we should get what we want. It's very, very simple. There's an example. If I leave the house at 7 o'clock in the morning and the bus arrives on time and there's no traffic jams, then I will be at work on time. That's it. That's an intervention logic, really. What we try to do then is take that very simple construct and apply it to the situations that we find ourselves in work when we're doing our programming exercises, when we're doing our evaluation or whatever, yeah. But it's really that simple, yeah. And so intervention logics sound complicated, but they surround us, yeah. They reflect what's called a theory of change. Do we know what a theory of change is? Theory of change is that it's what we think will happen if we want to try and change something. So before we start programming our action documents or intervention, we need to have an idea of what we think we want to change, and we think how we're going to do it, yeah. So the intervention logic just kind of captures that, yeah. It's a theoretical construct, it's not a reality, yeah. So it's just something that we think, it's something that we scribble on a piece of paper and we think this is how reality is going to go over the next 3 to 4 years, yeah. So we're going to do this, and if these things hold true, then we should get that. But it's not reality, yeah. This is something which I think is important to bear in mind. I've just been in Bosnia looking at a program there, and I looked at their log frame, and the log frame didn't make any sense. And I said, what's the story here? And they went, yeah, but it's set. This is it. This is the intervention logic. It's been agreed and signed off. And I said, yeah. And does it reflect reality? They said, no. I was like, so why don't you change it? And they said, well, we can't, can we? I said, why not? He said, because you can, because it's not reality anymore. So intervention logics and log frames are not reality. They're just what we think reality is going to look like, okay? So these are the term intervention logic now is starting to appear in action features and action documents. I remember back in the day when I started doing this that there was no such thing as intervention logics, but now they're starting to appear and you've got to fill it in and write down what you think the intervention logic is going to be. So it's quite common now in programming, especially IPA stuff. Yeah. But it's always been there, it's just been called something else. Quite the most common one is the log frame or the logical framework matrix. Yeah. There's also references to things like results change, but I won't bother you with that. Yeah. And your intervention logic refers to inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, impacts, and assumptions. Okay. I won't dwell too much on that terminology, but I'll just illustrate what I think these things look like in practice, or you might recognize them. And we use them not just for programming, but we also use them for evaluations, as you will have seen in your different evaluations that you've been involved in. You all had to agree on the reconstructed intervention logic, which will be the basis for the evaluation, and I'll just make a few points on that in a minute. So there's a log frame on the left. I'm sure you've seen that. And on the right, there's an intervention logic. There are a few differences. I could ask you to name them, but I won't. Due to time constraints, I won't. But you'll see that the basic difference is that the intervention logic diagram on the right doesn't have any indicators in it. Yeah. It's also got lines that go like lines that crisscross. Yeah, so they don't just go up and down. Yeah, so the idea is that that diagram can somehow explain in a little, can capture the interaction between the different levels of results a bit better than the log frame, because the log frame just goes like that. Yeah. Whereas the intervention logic goes kind of up, down, and across a bit more. Okay. Okay, so why do we need intervention logics for evaluations? Well, the basic reason is so that the evaluators can actually make sense of all of the different types of projects which have been pushed into the evaluation sample. Yeah. Some evaluations, and this is not the case for what we've been doing over the last few months, just are based on projects or contracts or an action document, and they will have their own log frame. And so what the and that log frame is essentially the intervention logic. So the evaluators just go in and verify that. So they go and check and see if it actually makes any sense, and then go and speak to the project partners and say, is that what you wanted? And they'll go, yeah, sort of. So then they verify that intervention logic, and once they've got that, yeah, then they can go to work. But many evaluations, like the thematic ones that we've done, are made up of a sample of lots of different projects, and Liliana's just put up on the screen before the many different types of activities or actions which have been put together into these 9 different thematic evaluations. Yeah. So they don't have a common log frame, and they do have some things in common, but more often than not, they are quite diverse. Heterogeneous is the fancy word for that. So the evaluator has to look at them and try to work out, okay, so what are the different elements of these different actions or projects which I can around which I can build this logic, and then I can use that to then analyze what's happened. Yeah. So that's what the reconstruction process is all about, and it's there just to serve as the basis for the analysis, yeah, in the evaluation, yeah. And it's prepared and agreed by the stakeholders at the start of the evaluation, or at least it should be. Yeah, so that little discussion that I've just described to you, and I think this has happened in the case of these particular evaluations, is that it's presented to you, this reconstructed intervention logic, and you will then have the chance to say, no, that's not right, I don't think that's there, and so on. And through that discussion, you then agree on what that intervention logic should look like. And that's the basic tool for the analysis that's in those evaluations. Okay. I can see that the font's gone crazy. Basically, that's what an evaluation intervention logic looks like in a basis of a results chain. Very simple. Left-hand side, the first bit are the inputs, then the activities, the outputs. The outputs are the things that are put in place by the projects, the contracts, and so on, that were not there before. Yeah. And then you've got the outcomes, and those are the changes which happen thanks to all those things that have been put in place by the projects, which are the outputs, yeah. It's a big difference. I won't dwell on this, but it's the most important bit of any evaluation. And then the impacts are the bigger changes which happen when lots of other things come into play, and our interventions only contribute to that. And it's all built by the if and then logic. So if we do these inputs and those things at the bottom, the assumptions, hold true, then we can do those activities. And if we do those activities and those assumptions hold true, then we'll get those outputs. And if those outputs are done and the assumptions hold true, then we get those outcomes, yeah, and so on. There's a lot of ver, sonra, I can imagine, from the poor interpreter there. My apologies. But it's all if and then. So if you look at a typical intervention logic in an evaluation, it looks a bit like this, I think. Yeah. So the inputs are there, the resources. Then you have the activities, the things that are carried out. Then we have the outputs, capacities, infrastructure, awareness, strategies. These are all the things that are put together, by all the things that are put in place by our projects, the things that weren't there before. Yeah. So at the end of our interventions, people should know more. There should be new buildings reconstructed, new equipment bought, and so on. Yeah. And then you get your outputs and your outcomes. And these are things like better functioning institutions, improved public services, more productive SMEs, and so on. Yeah. And then beyond that, you have longer term, wider effects, and these are the impacts. Yeah. And these are things like improved economic and social cohesion, meeting EU standards within a particular sector, and so on. Yeah. And underneath that are those assumptions. Now, the evaluators have to put all these together themselves. Yeah. So the evaluator needs to work out. Okay, I think the first bit and the second bit and the third bit are reasonably straightforward, yeah. You can work out what the resources are because you can check the financing agreements. You can work out what activities have been done. That's pretty easy as well because, of course, you can read the project reports or whatever, or the monitoring reports. You can even check what's been put in place in terms of outputs because they're usually covered again in reporting. But when you get to the outcomes, it's a little bit trickier, yeah, because there the changes are often not reported very well, and that's where it's very important for the evaluators to have an agreement with the partners about what are the changes that you were hoping to get from all of these different interventions, yeah, because that's the important bit, yeah. Just a couple of final points and then I'm done. Things to remember about an evaluation intervention logic. It's an analytical tool to help us understand what is expected to happen. It's very important to define as best possible, in my opinion, the outcomes in the intervention logic, because once you identify the outcomes, they're the changes which the IPA support should have brought about. Yeah. It's critical to make sure that that is clear. Yeah. It answers the so what question. My 13-year-old son's question to me when I tell him to do something. He just says, no, so what? Why should I do it? Well, so what? You've trained all these people. So what? You've bought all this new equipment. So what? Well, because things need to change. So the institution works better. We can do our job better. Yeah, we can provide better services to people. That's the change. They're the outcomes. And that's what the intervention logic of the evaluation should very, very clearly outline. Yeah. Yeah, and what it isn't. Yeah, it's not a new program. The intervention logic isn't anything new. It captures what's already there in a simple framework. And it's not a compliance tool. So the program must conform to the reconstructed intervention logic. No, the intervention logic's just there to help us try and understand what may or may not have happened. Yeah, you're not expected to meet it. You're not going to get into trouble if your project didn't fit in with the intervention logic. Quite the opposite. Maybe the intervention logic just needs to be changed to take into account of your project. Okay, so the final slide is, do I need to know about these intervention logics for evaluations? Well, unless you're an evaluator, you probably don't need to know about them in any great detail. Yeah. But if you're a user of evaluations, as you all are, then you probably it's useful to know what they are, yeah, and what they aren't, yeah, and why they're there, yeah. And that's why this presentation is happening, yeah. Yeah. And the final point, you might have seen the evaluation matrix. That's this big, frightening document at the back of the evaluation with lots of questions in. Well, the intervention logic links to that because the intervention logic paints the big picture. Yeah? So it kind of says these are all the things that we think are going to happen should have happened through the sample, and which we're now going to assess we're going to write the evaluation on. And the evaluation matrix drills down into more detail based on the evaluation questions. So the two are linked together, yeah. Okay, that's it. I'm not going to trouble you any further. I hope that was clear. If anything was not clear, or if you want to talk more about it, I am available at any point in the next couple of days. Thank you for your attention.
Good morning, everybody. So I will try to follow up and to be very quick because I know the time is pressing, so I'll do my best. Well, I think the basic things have been already explained, and to introduce the indicators, I would say there is a basic saying in English, I think, which says something like, if you don't know where you are going, how would you know that you are there? And that's what this indicator about. So you need to recognize whether you achieved your objectives or not. So therefore we say that indicators is something like a measure, and it's used for tracking systematically over the time whether we manage to achieve the final target or not. So it indicates the progress, or maybe in some cases the lack of progress. So this is how we recognize the success when we see it. Therefore, the indicators are basically the most basic issue we need for the establishment of the monitoring and evaluation system in principle, because that's how we follow all and everything what's going on. So we need it for the data collection, and we need it because we need the data later on to analyze and to report based on them. The issue is that it's very tricky to establish the good indicator, because if you choose the wrong one, you will be doing completely different things what you want and you need. To say just a simple example, for example, if you introduce, like in one industry, in one country, the sort of the indicator which was measuring the production of the furniture by the weight, then it happened that actually what was at the end seen was that they had the most heavy furniture in the world, because they were just measuring it by the weight. And it can easily happen for any other. So you have to be very careful about how you are developing and setting your indicators to measure the right and the proper thing. Indicators are in many cases called different ways, or these are the sort of the features they should have as the indicators. So for example, I think in the IPA guidelines you will find something what is called RACER. It's not the sort of the feature of some Istanbul taxi drivers. It's really respond to some sort of the acronyms. And in most cases, we use something like that it should be smart. So it means that it should be specific, meaning that it really, measure what you want to achieve. It should be measurable, so you have to have some sort of way how to do that. It has to be achievable or attainable. Then it has to be relevant, of course, to the appropriate level. I will come back to that, and it should be time-bound. So in some cases, for example, they also have the acronym which is called CREAM, again, not about the cuisine, but it stays for clear, relevant, economic, adequate, and monitorable. So basically, it should have three basic features. It should have some good sort of the quality, it should have a quantity, and should have a time, so when you are going to reach that. There are a few other characteristics of the proper indicator, and it has to have a baseline, because otherwise, if you measure it and you don't know where you started, you don't have much, because actually the baseline could be anywhere. In some cases, it can help you that some of the guidelines would be saying that for the output indicators, the baseline should be always 0, and for the outcome indicators, it should never be 0. So in some cases, it helps. Then you have, of course, to have a target value, because otherwise you don't know what to expect. In some cases, you will find something like milestones, which says, for example, how it should look like over the time, so during the individual years and so on. And for some cases, you can even use something which is called benchmark, and it is sort of the standard or something where you can compare your sort of the achievements with. So depending on what sort of activity you have, or whether you can, let's say, quantify it in such a way that you have a unit cost or something similar, so you have a comparable numbers. So what do you need to think when you set up the indicators? It's really rather complex, and it's something what you need to take into consideration. Why I am saying that? Because in some cases, the monitoring data are really very comprehensive, and some would count something like, in my country, the ITMS, the IT monitoring system we have for the EU funds, contain 3,000 indicators. So it's rather crazy, because I think if Mr. Gates is able to run his company in 175 countries all over the world with the 5 indicators, it should definitely be less. So it's not that complex. So therefore, you need to consider, where do you get the data? What is the source for the indicator? How do you collect it? What sort of the method you have to use? Who will collect the data? What is the frequency? How often you need to measure it? Then how much it would cost you? And then whether it's really difficult to get the data and to collect it? And who will analyze and report this data and use them at the end? So the first and basic rule, which pays to the indicators and to data collection in general, in case you collect some sort of the data, it has to be somehow processed and used for something. If it's not, you don't collect it. You don't need it. So it's a waste of the time. What I have noticed is that you should realize that what is set in the action documents or financial agreements or something like that is not cast in the stone. So remember that the indicators can be changed. You just need to justify it, but you can easily change it. And in many cases, you will find out that it's needed. And what you have to remember again is, in terms of the intervention logic, as Steve introduced, it's a sort of the pyramid, which means that at the output level, you have the numerous indicators. At the outcome level, it squeezes to, in many cases, 1 or 2, and then at the top, you have something, what is the impact indicator? Maybe it's even not defined at all. So these are the things which should be taken into account, and you should notice that it can't be the same sort of the indicators for all of the levels. So it's something what you have to distinguish. It has to have an appropriate level. It has to be arranged. So just to mention some of them because in most cases the output indicators are not the problem. But what I have noticed, the outcome indicators is something what is more difficult, and this is something what needs to track the change. So that's what you actually measure. And for example, here you have, let's say, the outcome which says improved coverage of preschool programs. So you would always have the objectives in terms of improved or increased or strengthened or something like that. And then you have to set up the indicators at the proper level for that. And for example, you have the percentage of eligible rural children which are enrolled in the preschool. So you need to identify, okay, my baseline is 35%, I need to achieve 60%, and I want to achieve that at the end of the project, which is for most of the outcome indicators the most appropriate time at the time of the end of the project. So that would be very briefly and very quickly about the indicators. Thank you for your attention. I am also available for any questions if needed.
Thank you very much, Dagmar. We apologize, but we learned from this experience to better time the presentations. We evaluators like to talk much. So we have 2 questions to discuss around the tables, but first we will go for a coffee. And if possible, in 15 minutes, if you don't finish the coffee, you can bring the coffee to the tables. And myself and my colleagues, we will come to your tables and discuss some ideas starting from the presentations, but practical things, how we can make things work better. So let's continue discussing at the coffee break. Thank you.
Tekrardan hoş geldiniz. Etkinliğimizin bu bölümünde değerlendirme uzmanları tarafından yönetilen yuvarlak masa toplantısı düzeniyle birlikte müdahale mantığı ve göstergelerinden en iyi şekilde nasıl yararlanabiliriz'i tartışıyor olacağız. Ekranda gördüğümüz sorularla tartışmalarımıza devam ediyor olacağız. Bunlardan bir tanesi mantıksal çerçeveyle alakalı. Programlama ve projede mantıksal çerçevenin nasıl kullanıldığı ve ne zaman kullanıldığı ve deneyimlerimize göre yenilikçi metotların nasıl kullanıldığını tartışacağız. Bu grup çalışması için sizlerden bir araya gelmenizi rica ediyoruz masalarda. AB Başkanlığı ve proje ekibi olarak biz de masaları ziyaret ediyor olacağız ve tartışmanın etkili geçmesini ve çıktıların ve sonuçların toparlanmasını takip ediyor olacağız. Çok teşekkürler. Değerli misafirlerimiz, tartışma ortamı için son 5 dakikamız kaldı. Değerli katılımcılarımız, tartışma ortamı şu an için sona erdi. Çıktılarınızı paylaşmak için belirlediğiniz bir veya iki konuşmacıyla sonuçları tartışabiliriz. Çok teşekkür ederiz. Söz almak isteyen gruplar eğer kendilerini belli edebilirlerse mikrofon tahsis ediyor olacağız.
Merhaba herkese. Bizim grubumuz başlangıcı yapmış olsun arzu ederseniz. Bizim masamız temel haklar ve sivil toplum sektörünün temsilcilerinin bulunduğu bir masaydı. Ve iki soru üzerinden tartışmalarımızı yürüttük. Bildiğiniz gibi ilki yenilikçi yöntemlerdi değerlendirmede. Yaptığımız tartışmalarda aslında Jandarma Genel Komutanlığı'nın bir projesinin üzerinden gittik. Kadın ve çocuk kısım amirliklerinin kapasitesinin geliştirilmesi. Örneğin burada biraz üst düzey gösterge olarak kadınların ilki erken evliliklerin azaltılması, diğeri de kız çocuklarının okullaşma oranlarıyla ilgili göstergeler vardı. Bunun haricinde bütün proje uygulama süresi boyunca Jandarma Genel Komutanlığı ihbar sayılarındaki ve vakalardaki artışlarla ilgili sürekli olarak rakamlarla ilgili bilgilendirmede bulundu ve proje boyunca bu rakamlar arttı ki bu toplumda şiddet vakalarıyla ilgili farkındalığın da yükselmesinin bir göstergesiydi. Dolayısıyla değerlendirmeyle bağlantısını kuracak olursak burada hem niteliksel hem de niceliksel göstergelerin birlikte kullanılması yenilikçi bir yöntem olarak düşünülebilir. Sivil toplumu ilaveten belki anlatırız. Ayrıca tabii pandemi büyük bir etki yarattı yine bu değerlendirme kriterlerinde. Çoğumuz çevrim içi yöntemlere geçtik ve bunlarla beraber yeni göstergelerin belirlenmesi ihtiyacı da ortaya çıktı. Projelerin değerlendirmesinde mantıksal müdahale çerçevesiyle ilgili de aslında bütün uygulama süresince bize bir yol haritası niteliği taşıyor. Dolayısıyla özellikle de veriler anlamında bakıldığında bunların kanıtlarla, verilerle desteklenmesi önem arz etti. Ayrıca cinsiyet eşitliği tabii bütün projeler için artık geçerli. Bütün projelerde cinsiyet eşitliğine dayalı göstergeler belirlenmeli ve bunlarla ilgili de raporlamada bulunmak istiyoruz. Dolayısıyla aslında temel haklarda yürütülen bu projeler bu alanda da çok büyük bir etki yaratıyor. Kısaca tartıştıklarımız bunlardı sanıyorum. Sivil toplumla ilgili de belki biraz.
Merhabalar. Tartıştığımız soruları ben sivil toplum gözünden ele alacağım. İlk sorumuz inovatif metotlar. Değerlendirmede inovatif metotları biz aslında istemeden pandemiyle beraber geçtik. Çünkü Kültür ve Sanat Kurumu olarak daha önce hep fiziksel alanlarda konferanslar, sergiler, gelen katılımcı sayıları, davetiye sayısı, teyit verenler gibi bir değerlendirme aşamamız vardı. En basit bir faaliyetin değerlendirmesini bile o faaliyete katılanlarla belirliyorduk. Ancak pandemiyle beraber çevrim içi eğitim platformları oluşturduk. Çevrim içi kanallar oluşturduk. Bir YouTube kanalımız var artık. Eğitim, kültür, sanat her türlü konuda insanlara her yerden ulaşabilir olduk. Tabii bunlar çok basit adımlar ama daha önce geleneksel bir düzen olduğu için hep fiziksel ortamda bir gözlem yapmaya alışmış bir kurumduk. Pandemiyle beraber diğer Avrupalı kültür enstitülerimizi de platformlarda takip ettik. Birbirimizin tweetlerine karşılık verdik, faaliyetlerini beğendik. Dolayısıyla bir kurumlar arası iletişim bağı oluşturduk. Belki de en inovatif adım buydu bizim için ve bu da bir etkinliği, projeyi, faaliyeti değerlendirirken çeşitlilik kazandırdı ve bu çeşitlilik niceliksel bir veri sunduğu için aslında çok sağlıklı ve çok da kanıtlanabilir bir adım oldu. İkinci soru, intervention logic önemi, yani müdahale mantığının projelerimizdeki önemine gelince, müdahale mantığı bize projeye başlarken bir kroki, bir yol haritası, bir grafik sunduğu için projedeki adımları takip ederken çok daha etkin, Ve zamanın kullanımına dikkat ederek bir navigasyon misali aslında bizi götürdüğü yere daha güvenle adım atabiliyoruz. Çünkü önümüzdeki adımın ne gerektirdiğini, nasıl bir hazır bulunuşluk istediğini değerlendirebiliyoruz. Dolayısıyla müdahale mantığı aslında projenin yol göstericisi denebilir. Bu bize hem zaman tasarrufu sağlıyor hem de projedeki ekip üyelerinin efektif mesai yapmasını ve enerjilerini boşa kullanmamasını, hedefe yönük, amaca yönelik hareketlerle yol almamıza katkıda bulunuyor. Çok teşekkür ederim.
Thank you very much. I think I will take over now moderation because time is very advanced. But I am really so happy that I see this involvement. I was also at one of the tables and we exchanged experiences and learning about the challenges in using the intervention logic and the indicators. I'm afraid we will not have time to hear one person from each table. I would pick up also if any of the guests not from our team would like to share something with the audience, with the this plenary session. Is anyone else who would like to share something? If not, I propose for to reschedule a bit our session. We will collect from our colleagues what are the answers agreed at each table, and we will share tomorrow in the closing event with you all. And I propose to go into the last theme for discussion, evolution of how we see evaluation in Turkey in the last years. And I will invite for this with very short and concise presentations. First, Mrs. Cemre Güzel from Monitoring and Evaluation Unit, and then my colleagues Roland and Tomislav. They complete our core team. They were at our first meeting the persons that I relied heavily because it was obvious that they have a huge experience in Turkey and they will be pillars for our evaluation. So first, please, Cemre Hanim, if you would like to say a few words how you see the evaluation in Turkey evolution, and then I will ask directly Roland to continue.
Çok teşekkürler Liliana. Ben de biraz geç oldu ve de öğle yemeği öncesinde biliyorum hızlı olmaya çalışacağım. Önce ama fırsat bulmuşken ben hepinize önce kurumum adına hepinizi saygıyla selamlamak istiyorum. Cemre Güzel, ben değerlendirme projesinin faydalanıcısı olduğu Avrupa Birliği Başkanlığı'ndaki İzleme Değerlendirme Başkanlığı'nın daire başkanıyım. Biz bu projenin yararlanıcısı olarak bu projeyi yürütüyoruz. O yüzden hani bugüne kadarki projenin çeşitli aşamalarında vermiş olduğunuz katkılar için hepinize çok teşekkür ediyorum önce. Ve bundan sonrası için de teşekkür ediyorum. Bu önümüzdeki 1,5 gün bizim için çok önemli. Çünkü bizim için de ilk defa ilk deneyim diyebiliriz. Daha önce bu büyüklükte, bu kapsamda bir değerlendirme projesi yapmadık açıkçası. Dolayısıyla bu değerlendirme referans grupları ve bunlarla düzenlediğimiz taslak raporları tartışma ortamı da ilk defa uygulayacağımız bir şey. En azından bizim için ilk. Türkiye'nin değerlendirme konusundaki deneyimine gelirsek, ben şimdi o konuda çok yıllardır bizlerle çalışmış bir şekilde Türkiye'deki yürüyen değerlendirme projelerinde görev almış arkadaşlarıma söz vereceğim değerlendirme ekibinden. Ama ben önce kendi ufak deneyimlerimden size bahsetmek istedim. 2004 yılında bu sabah Sevil Hanım'la konuştuk. Onu sizlerle paylaşayım istedim. O zaman ben Merkezi Finans ve İhale Biriminde çalışıyorum. Ve 2004 yılında Sevil Hanım aradı beni telefonla, kendisini tanımıyorum. Dedi ki bir işte sivil toplum alanında bir proje için sizinle görüşmeye gelmek istiyorum. Buyurun gelin dedim. Sevil Hanım geldi ilk gün. Sevil Hanım'ın nereden geldiğini anlamadım. Nasıl bir kapsamda beni ziyaret etmek istediği hakkında en ufak bir fikrim yoktu. Proje hakkında bana sorular sordu. Niye bu soruları soruyor? Ne almaya çalışıyor? Gizli bir ajandası, gündemi mi var? Buralardan nereye varacak? En ufak bir fikrim yok. Hakikaten AB projelerinde değerlendirme, izleme değerlendirme konusu hani hepimizin zaman zaman içerisinde yer aldığı, projelerde çalışanların bir şekilde yanından yöresinden geçtiği ama çok da içselleştiremediğimiz bir alan diye düşünüyorum değerlendirmeyi. Aslında sürece ve o proje döngüsüne çok daha fazla katkısı olacakken biz bunu yeterince içselleştiremediğimiz için katkısını da somutlaştıramıyoruz diye düşünüyorum. Sanırım hani benimkine benzer deneyimleri proje uygulamasında görev alan arkadaşlarımız zaman zaman yaşamışlardır. Birisi geliyor, Rom'dan geliyorum diyor. Birisi geliyor, delegasyondan geliyorum izlemeye diyor. Birisi işte değerlendirme kapsamında geliyorum diyor. Farklı perspektiflerden ama aynı konu etrafında dolanan sorular soruyorlar. O yüzden hani bunları kafamızda oturtana kadar biraz zaman geçiyor gerçekten de. Şimdi bugünkü projeyle ve bugünkü çalıştayın sonunda inşallah daha somut ve böyle yapısal bir rapor çıkaralım diye uğraşıyoruz. Yılın sonuna doğru Eylül ayında herkesin de tatilini bitirip döndüğü zaman olsun istedik. Bu sonuçları hep birlikte paylaşalım ve bunlardan öğrenelim istiyoruz. O yüzden lütfen hani raporları da değerlendirirken o gözle bakmanızı istiyoruz. Hani gerçekten boşluklarımız olabilir, hatalarımız olabilir, şunu şöyle yapsaydık daha iyi olabilirdi diyebiliriz. Bunları cesur bir şekilde ifade edebiliriz. Bunlardan yöneticilerimiz lütfen alınsın, alınmasın diye düşünerek değil, bunu ileriye dönük bir iyileştirme faaliyeti olarak görün lütfen. Çok teşekkür ediyorum. Az konuşacağım dedim, çok konuştum. Ben sözü gene Türkiye'deki değerlendirme konusunda bahsettiğim gibi Sevil Hanım'ın olduğu projede Roland da vardı. Uzun yıllar öncesinden gelen bir Türkiye deneyimi var onun da ve yıllara yayılmış. O yüzden ona bırakacağım. Çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Right, yeah. Thank you very much for the introduction, Cembre. When I was first asked by Liliana to talk a little bit about 10 years of evaluation experience, I thought, yeah, that is wishful thinking. If it would just be 10 years, that would be really nice. It has now been 20 years of working in Turkey, and so a lot of nostalgic ideas came up in my mind. I liked very much what Bülent Bey said about sweet eating and sweet talking. I specialized in sweet eating over my years here and only slowly learned about the sweet talking. Coming to the sort of experience in Turkey with evaluation over the years, I think we can go very happily to lunch. It has been a tremendous development. What you say, Cembre, really rings very true. At the beginning, it was sometimes a challenge to really establish a good level of communication, establish a good level of trust. I think I spent far more time discussing and explaining what evaluation is not than explaining what you have all heard today, what evaluation actually is, what the different tools are. It was extremely important to differentiate, say, between audit and control and evaluation, to really establish that idea that we are all here really to learn, ideally to learn together, and that this is not a sort of exercise about controlling people, about criticizing people. And I remember how difficult that sometimes was, because we just had a fascinating discussion here about people who are implementing projects and who are very proud of their achievements. And then somebody comes in that they have never met and asks difficult questions without explaining them. And so that took some time to overcome all this. But I feel now that over the years, now I've come back to Turkey every year, and I feel now we are getting to this level of genuine communication a lot quicker than we used to in the past. And there are all sorts of different factors that explain this. There has been tremendous progress in terms of Yeah. First at the conceptual level, of course, to sort of understand what is really evaluation about, but also at the sort of more institutional level. So we had colleagues here at the table that actually are very much involved as part of their daily work in evaluation, that follow the ROM missions, that participate in monitoring missions. I had the good fortune of going to Adana in the context of this evaluation with colleagues from NIPAC. So there is now an institutionalized approach. It is inherent in evaluation that in the institutions in Turkey that people are dealing with evaluation. Also in terms of methods, yeah, so I think we have all learned, I have certainly learned, I would have never been able to explain what Stephen explained so nicely in terms of the intervention logic 20 years ago. We just asked questions that seem to sort of make sense more or less, and slowly that has become more systematic, and there is now a good methodology, and I think this is also well understood in the different institutions. Right, yeah, my thinking is not very well because I really need some sugar levels to increase. I didn't taste any of the chocolate, so I think I hand over to Tomislav, who also has a long-standing experience of evaluation here. You have a mic.
Yeah, well, I can repeat everything what Roland said about evaluation and experience from Turkey. Actually, I did back in 2007 evaluation of one project that was called the Local Administration Reform, and the EU was supporting this project. And I'm doing it now again. It's Local Administration Reform Phase 3, again financed by the EU delegation. So it is, I can of course repeat that it was challenging doing evaluation back in 2007 and getting answers, etc., but now what has changed, I think our stakeholders are a little bit overwhelmed with so many interviews and participating in so many evaluations and raw missions, etc., but at the same time they preserve this honesty and openness and friendliness while talking to us. But what is really important, at least from my perspective, is to see how these lessons learned and recommendations from the previous evaluation have been incorporated and how much it helped to institutional development of some of the partners that participated in first, second, and third phase of the local administration reform project. And this primarily relates Union of Municipalities of Turkey, who used to be a partner in the first phase, became probably one of the most structured and, in terms of delivery of services, one of the strongest association of local authorities in Europe, being capable really to deliver quality services to their members. At the same time, it is interesting to see how capacity building, that sometimes we don't think, we perceive that there are many projects that are dealing with trainings, capacity development, study tours, and we think that these projects are not effective, but when you observe this after 15 years, you can, I have noticed that municipalities, especially new metropolitan municipalities, are becoming much more skilled in getting into international partnerships, in putting forward projects, developing projects, delivering high-quality services. And what is really important for a local governance system, they are much more skilled to listen to the citizens. There are different mechanisms that have been established to observe the needs and bring citizens in a policy-making process. And this is actually what was, for example, in the previous phases of this local administration reform project, noted as a challenge, but the last phase is exactly addressing this challenge. And the last, I think, what is quite an important lessons learned that was improved with this last phase, it is a data collection system that was established at the local level. Now, municipalities in Turkey with support of the Ministry of Environment and Urbanization. They have improved tremendously the system that was established in the previous phases, and all the issues that were identified in the phase 2 have been addressed. So from my perspective, it is to see that all these lessons and recommendations are not just written and left aside, but they're really materialized. And this, what really made, looking at the project after 15 years, I just felt that these funds were adequately invested, and that there are some there are results at the local level in Turkey. So that's from my side. I think it's a great work. I mean, I'm a local governance person, so I always feel very motivated to talk about local authorities and the importance of building capacities at the local level. So, so that's it for myself. Thank you.
Roland, is anything else to add? Time is very advanced. Roland, is anything that you planned to add? Or we can stop here? Seville, would you like to say anything?
Just a few sentences that I started with Roland and Gemma together, as she said. So I am the spy. Ben bahsedilen Sevil Hanım benim. 2004'ten beri biz de sizlerle beraber değerlendirmeyi öğrendik. Değerlendirme nedir'i biz de sizlerle birlikte geliştirdik. Faydasını biz de sizlerle birlikte gördük ve de devam ediyoruz. Bence değerlendirme çok iyi bir şeydir. Her şey için, sadece projeler için değil, kendimizi bile hayat içerisindeki yaşamımızda değerlendirmemizin faydası var. Bunun için de bir tane intervention logic çıkarabilirsiniz. Bir tane de log frame hazırlarsınız. Hedefinizi de koyarsınız. Bu hedef pilav pişirmekten evliliğe kadar olabilir. Ne hedef koyarsanız koyun ama bir logical framework'e göre gidin. Yoksa bir yerlerde tökezlersiniz. Ben bunu gördüm.
Thank you very much, Seville. I'm very glad that you had the last intervention because I must say again that we relied very much on our Turkish colleagues. I don't like to say local experts. Our Turkish colleagues which has international experience, but they helped us to plug in the reality of Turkey. It's a pity there is no more time to discuss, but you have Cemre here from the beginning and she can continue on the foundations of evaluation. One small observation, I'm glad that at the end we don't feel we have to stay there to speak, but we are all together in the field working on theoretical and practical discussions on evaluation. Now I would like to close this session with another poll. Let's reflect again about evaluation and about our perceptions. And we kindly ask you to go back to the menti.com, but there is a different code. And now the question is about how do you see in the future the evaluation methods, if they will be used at the same level, more or less. So you can move the circle to 1 if it is, you think it will be used more, leave it at 0 if it will be used to the same extent as at present, or to -1 if you think that the use will decrease. Okay, we see that as an average, we will use more intensively the methods. So we will have more rich evaluations or more evaluations. And it seems all of them, it was a tendency, the surveys to decrease. I think it was the only method which had at some stages a decrease. But we see that not only the interactive methods, interviews and focus groups will increase, but also the statistical and administrative data analysis. And in our group on judiciary sector, we had an example when institutions, administrative data are an important resource to measure impact. So everything, I think, links together. We can stop with this one, and we will work more on evaluation and more intense. This is the conclusion. Could we go now to the next slide? This is a personal perspective. So next slide. Okay. Which statement best describes your future involvement in evaluation? Please go on the next slide on your screen, and you will have several options. One option is more involvement. Another, you have only one option possible to choose. Less involvement because limited trust in evaluation. Continue learning. More focus on evaluation results and implementation of the recommendations, more use of statistical and administrative data, and more focus on sophisticated methods, macroeconomic modeling, counterfactual evaluation. It's changing. I think this is a very interesting question. Okay. We will have a bit of everything, also a bit of concern about how reliable are evaluations in a such complex environment. Indeed, we give answers, counterfactual evaluation is telling us in average what is the impact, but we think, could we trust, did they consider all the factors? Could we consider, identify all the factors? So I think it's absolutely normal. But I would take the positive here. It's about it's a lot about implementation, so utility of the evaluation. Then on the second rank is continuing learning and more involvement. I think it's a great end of our plenary discussion. Now, thank you very much for the effort, and from our team we enjoyed this working session in small groups. I close the technical discussion and I let Beste to guide you for the next sessions.
Teşekkür ederiz. Katılımlarınız için çok teşekkür ederiz. Katılımlarınız için çok teşekkür ederiz. Öğle yemeğine çıkıyor olacağız. -1. katta öğle yemeğimiz. Bu esnada salon aranjmanı yapacağımız için lütfen tüm eşyalarınızı yanınızda bulundurunuz. Çünkü bu salonlar 3'e ayrılacak ve ERG toplantılarımız orada devam edecek. Bugünün devamında 1. tema, 6, 7. tema ve 5. temanın sektörel ERG gruplarıyla devam edeceğiz. Yarın tema 2, tema 3, tema 8 ve 9 için ERG'lerle başlayacağız. Saat 11.30'da plenary discussion oturumu için hepinizi tekrar burada bekliyor olacağız. Çok teşekkür ederiz. Afiyet olsun. Bir buçuk saat görünüyor. Yalnız zaman kısıtlamasından dolayı 1 saatte burada olmaya dikkat edersek çok seviniriz.